7:38, Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I want to get right to the Newsmaker Hotline. Matthew Hurtt joins us, our grassroots political analyst and our friend here on Nashville's Morning News. Matthew, always great to have you on. So let's talk about what we saw last night with Bret Baier and Kamala Harris. I've been playing audio all morning long. So just give me your broad brush opinion of what went down.
Out of the gate, Kamala Harris failed on the question of immigration. Bret Baier asked her very directly, how many people have you released that have caused a problem in this country, that have committed crimes? She demurred and threw it back to Congress. You and I have talked about that immigration legislation time and time again, but there were actions that the administration took as soon as they took office, and that has led to the flood of illegal immigrants being released into the country, and creating these instances where we see the death of Laken Riley and many, many others across the country. And that set the tone for the interview. 26 minutes of interview, and at the very end, Bret Baier said, Kamala, your team is waving me to stop this interview. They knew in real time that it was a disastrous interview, and it seemed to confirm what I think the average Fox News viewer would believe, is that she's just not fit for office, and she's just not able to answer these questions in a meaningful way.
Well, and here's the question that I would have when we talk about her fitness for office. I think part of that is that she doesn't have the ability to prepare for an important event like an interview on Fox News. I mean, it's like she's either not prepared or her preparation is just to blame Donald Trump for everything and not take any responsibility for what happened the last 3.5 years.
Well, national media outlets covered at the beginning of this administration that Kamala Harris doesn't actually read the briefing. She doesn't read, a lot of folks who go into a meeting, especially folks at an executive level, their team and their staff brief them on what to be prepared for. And the national media covered 3 or 4 years ago that Kamala Harris just doesn't read those briefings. And this was evident. It's like going into first period algebra and having not done your homework. Not being ready, and the American people saw this on full display last night.
Let me ask you a question. A friend of mine just sent me this, and I haven't even gone through it, but it's a familiar story. The betting markets are, I guess they call it the poly market. The betting markets, even more after last night, are favoring Donald Trump. If you want to make money in this political campaign, your money's got to be on Donald Trump to win this election. I've heard some people say that is the strongest indicator as to who's going to win this election. Give me your thoughts.
The betting markets are a more accurate, not a predictor, but just the sense of the electorate, or the sense particularly of people who bet with their money. For years, they've been doing this in the United Kingdom, across the pond, and that has yielded some of the most specific and accurate results of upcoming elections. Those betting numbers, the way they break, and now we're doing it here in the U.S., and I think we're going to see a lot of the same kind of results. Again, somebody who places a bet is more interested in winning that bet, particularly if it is one that would yield a high return. And so I think that the betting market numbers are going to be more accurate even in the polling in predicting the outcome of these elections, especially state by state in places like Pennsylvania or Michigan or Georgia. Last night, of course, Bret Baier, Kamala Harris having their interview. One of the things that I'm noticing, and you've probably seen a lot of I've been on the air all morning, so I don't know exactly what the spin is, but one of the things that I'm noticing is that basically, if you are a Kamala Harris supporter, then you're fine with her performance last night. If you're a Donald Trump supporter, you think she did terribly. Do you think if somebody was an independent or doesn't have sort of this preconceived notion of what's going to happen, how do you think the average person that isn't mired down in politics saw this interview last night? Those who are dug in will not change their mind. This morning, I started seeing my friends on left-wing Twitter talk about how she did a great job and how even though Bret Baier talked over her, she was strong and competent and capable. Again, those are my friends on the left-wing side of Twitter. But the people in the middle are going to see clips. They're going to hear reaction on programs like this. They're going to talk about it at the water cooler with their coworkers. And in those conversations, in those reactions, is where this interview makes a big difference, because those people who are on the fence still, and there are many of them, will formulate their opinion based on what a friend or a colleague or a neighbor or a coworker talks about, and that is going to help, I think, ultimately help Donald Trump in many instances, in many of these conversations, and it will continue to hurt Kamala Harris. This is part of a narrative. Combine this with the polling trend, combine this with the wave of softball interviews she did, combine this with the enthusiasm and energy we're seeing in early vote numbers, and all of this plays into a narrative that Kamala Harris is on the last legs of a presidential campaign.
I have fun with this. Brian Stelter, I'm going to play it for you.
I think this strategy from Harris was a Google strategy. She wanted Fox viewers to start to Google some of the things she was saying, because some of the comments she was making in this interview are foreign to the Fox audience. For example, General Mark Milley saying Trump is a fascist to the core. That's barely been covered on Fox News. So she was able to get some of those talking points in. This was the most adversarial interview Kamala Harris has probably ever done. Instead of getting to debate Trump again, she got to debate Bret Baier. And a lot of viewers are going to come away saying, wow, she's willing to do that. That's a sign of toughness and strength.
I don't really think your average Fox viewer was thinking that. That's number one. And number two, I don't know about you, Matthew, and I said this earlier, I think the average Donald Trump supporter doesn't really care what Mark Milley or anyone else has to say when they call Donald Trump a fascist who is unfit to serve. It must be Thursday if we're hearing yet another person say that about Donald Trump. It's just a tired old comment that people are making about Donald Trump because they've got nowhere else to go. Am I wrong?
You're absolutely right in that regard. If any speaker were to go to Fox News or to an audience like who listens to this program and leads with Donald Trump is a fascist, that is going to just roll off their back like water off a duck. This does not connect. Conservatives, I liken it to when conservatives make an argument about, say, Margaret Sanger and abortion for Black Americans. It's an argument that just doesn't land with the audience. But the person who makes the argument continues to make that argument. And so this is something that the average Fox viewer is going to hear it. It's going to go away into a memory hole, and it will not help them formulate an opinion about Donald Trump. And it will help them consider that, again, another attack on Donald Trump by Kamala Harris that seems unfair.
Do you think that last night's interview will do anything for the polling? I think, even though you and I both acknowledge and agree that polling is nothing but a snapshot of what is going on right now, I think part of what is, this is like a no crap Mandis moment, but, the polling is having an impact, I believe, on the enthusiasm of people on the left, because they know that Harris is not doing well, and I believe that it is exciting the base for Donald Trump. And so, from that regard, I think it is having a bit of an impact.
An interview like what happened last night plays into the enthusiasm aspect of a campaign. In Arlington, Virginia, where Donald Trump got 17% of the vote in 2020, only half of people have cast early votes than did in 2020. And so there is a significant enthusiasm gap for Democrats versus Republicans who are enthused about this election, either by Donald Trump or by the failed policies of Kamala Harris. This interview is, again, just another sort of check mark in the ongoing conversation about the narrative and about enthusiasm, and it plays into Republicans are enthusiastic, Republicans are excited, and Democrats will continue to be depressed in their turnout. That is to say, they're going to turn out at a lower rate. We're seeing this in places like Virginia, places like Georgia and Pennsylvania, and it is playing out in real time.
One of the things I noticed, I went to go early vote yesterday. One of the things that I noticed is that there were a ton of people on the first day of early voting. 2474, we have the super text line. 2474 asks this. Dan, Kamala is the most inept candidate in modern history. Is that may be true? I don't know. What do you think?
I think that's pretty accurate. Again, we see this in the conversations that she has. She opened her Bret Baier interview with this long introductory statement that allows her to gives her time to formulate an argument and then meander. And she even did that in her interview with Charlemagne the God. I think there was, we see this time and time again with her. She presents these long and winding introductory statements that then allow her to go on to say almost nothing. And anybody who is watching with a keen eye and really listening to what she says will come away from that and say she said absolutely nothing in that answer.
All right, so we've got 2.5 weeks left, I guess, whatever it is. And, if you're advising Kamala Harris, if you're advising Donald Trump, what do you tell them to do? Trump first.
Well, Donald Trump should just continue to do what he's doing. I think it would make sense to have more of these rallies. We're seeing him do them in curious places like Coachella. Virginia could certainly use a Donald Trump rally, but if I'm Kamala Harris, I really want to be able to answer the questions and show that I'm relatable and likable, and I just don't know that she can do that in the next 19 days.
All right. One of the things, just very quickly, but Kamala says that people are exhausted. This seems to be one of her little talking points, that people are exhausted because Donald Trump is so divisive. I don't think that's true. I think people are pumped up. I think if people are exhausted, it's because groceries are 25% higher. We're dealing with all the credit card debt we had because we had to use our credit cards to pay off our groceries and our bills during the times of 9.3, 9.4% inflation rate. I think that's what has people exhausted. I don't think Donald Trump's quote, air quote, divisive nature is exhausting people.
The demographic who is exhausted about this election are usually high turnout Democrats who are not turning out according to the early vote numbers that smarter people than me are tracking on Twitter all the time. And I encourage your listeners to check those folks out because the exhaustion is coming from Democrats who just aren't turning out.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people fired up last night and yesterday in Mount Juliet when we're all early voting. So, Matthew, how can folks find you on X?
I'm on Twitter at Matthew Hurtt, MattheWhurtt.